let's move on then to The Last Circus.
I'll warn you now, folks. This review may contain tangents. Now, first of all, I learned an important lesson from Balada Triste de Trompeta, which is, in Spanish, sad trumpet ballad, named after a song that was a big hit in Spain in the 1960s. That is, for some reason, and going back to my topic from earlier, translated to English as The Last Circus. Why wouldn't sad trumpet ballad work? Yeah. That's a key thing about the film. Whereas The Last Circus, well, there's a circus. There's no suggestion it's the last one.
No, very disappointed with that. I know of circuses that have existed past this film, so yes. It's a lie.
Yeah. But yeah, this I really am on a tangent here. But as to my earlier comments, Scott, I'm always fascinated by this, the changes and things when something is like wholesale changed. And often it'll be like a reference to a particular event or person or something that in a country, a film's native country, completely understood. Probably lost its side, so we changed the name. That's sort of the case here with that song by Raphael. But really, sad trumpet ballad, that's understandable anywhere, surely? Because The Last Circus makes you think it's about the circus, and it's actually not. And it's also not the last one, so lies. Frau Farbishna needs to pop up again, I think. Yeah. I learned an important lesson from The Last Circus, and it's not what it's about. Unlike Perdita Durango, I am confident that it is about something, and even know what, and could indeed expound upon it, but rather that one should never trust one's memory over your friends. Or rather, trust your friend's memory over your own. It's about clowns, I recently kvetched. It's only got clowns at the beginning, said Scott, the bastard. It has clowns throughout. And as has been well established, clowns are the worst. I mean, it does admittedly have a clown disfiguring his own face with caustic soda and a steam iron, then dressing up in a makeshift clown-cum-bishop costume before holding an Uzi in each hand and murdering people. So it's a pretty unique take on clowns, I'll give it that.
In my defence, at that point, is it really a clown? I would argue not.
But there are many things later, though, Scott. And still, though, clowns. I would like to make it clear here that I have no fear of clowns, a phobia that some people do have. Rather, I think clowns are a societal ill, a worthless, talentless group of individuals that exist solely to perpetuate misery and make the world a generally sadder, less magical place. Like Tory MPs. Beginning in the middle of the Spanish... Sorry, just to be clear, tangent over. Beginning in the middle of the Spanish Civil War, a troupe of clowns is entertaining some children. These children are laughing, so that's historical veracity right out of the window from the get-go. Though they start screaming soon enough, which seems much more correct where clowns are concerned. When a division of the Republican militia bursts in and forces the clowns to join in the fight against Franco's nationalists. One clown, played by Santiago Segura, and referred to inexplicably as the funny clown. Can you set like an audio shrug there? Because that's what I'm doing. Finds his true calling and slaughters most of a regiment armed with just a machete. The clown is imprisoned and forced to perform slave labour, allowing him the opportunity to see his son, Javier, and tell him that he should become a clown, but that he's seen too much sorrow to be the funny clown. So he must become the sad clown, the clown that nobody laughs at. So, a clown. The young Javier has more immediate concerns in mind, though, and performs some acts of defiance against the nationalist forces, one of which inadvertently leads to his father's death and seems to cause Javier to become timid and unwilling to speak out against aggression, something we realise when we meet the adult Javier, played by Carlos Areces, in the 1970s, about to start his first job as a clown. Here he meets Sergio, or Begbie the Clown, played by Antonio de la Torre, a violent psychopath and wife-beater who rules with fear over the rest of the circus, even the owner. Javier falls in love with Sergio's girlfriend, the stunningly attractive and amazingly named Carolina Bang, another member of the circus, but, like the others, is too afraid to stand up to Sergio or stop his violent assaults of Carolina. That may, in fact, have been very smart self-preservation as, when he eventually does do so, it does not end well for him. Close to, but not quite dead. Something goes click inside Javier's brain as he lies, broken, in a hospital bed. And it's at this point that Javier and the film goes what I believe is correctly called proper mental. Setting in motion a series of events that will see Javier go feral, eat a raw deer, become a human gun dog, bite General Franco, and then become a heavily armed Pope Pennywise, as I mentioned earlier. After writing this, I went back and listened to the discussion Scott and I had in our previous podcast Incarnation about this film, this being the only film in this episode either of us had seen before, and I was struck by how much less negative I felt about it this time around. Now, I can't say that I like it, but I'm certainly much more appreciative of it. I was not struck, though, by the deep antipathy I showed towards clowns in that discussion 10 years ago, because that is a true and abiding stance. But I was amused, though still disappointed, by Scott's assertion that there's no standing orders for armies to kill all clowns, and we call ourselves civilised. The leaps of time, location and knowledge were of little consequence to me on this viewing, and likewise the tonal shifts, because there's just so much else crazy going on, but also because I was focusing on background details more, some of which later become foreground features, including the regular references to the case of El Lute, seen as a hero by many and a symbol of opposition to Franco. There's certainly a lot of symbols here, and references, and allegories, and metaphors, all in a film that begins as a war movie of sorts, and ends like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein done as grand opera, all on top of a giant cross built above a cave filled with the skeletons of tens of thousands of soldiers, just in case there wasn't enough imagery for you. It's full, is what I'm saying. Over full, really. And that's the problem. There's certainly plenty to dig into, but there's too much, and seemingly being unable to decide what to put in, De La Iglesia decided to go with everything, often all at the same time. It's certainly, like many of his films, distinctive, and quite unlike most others you're likely to see. But The Last Circus could well have done with a good strong pinch of restraint. But also, clowns. Not something I could in good conscience recommend. Well, that's The Clowns. The film? Yeah, probably. It's okay. I could only recommend it because it's interesting. But be prepared for clowns, which are wrong.
Yeah, I still prefer it over Pan's Labyrinth, to be fair. I deliberately didn't go back. It was, 10 years ago, I guess, by this point?
Yes, almost exactly.
A decade. I didn't go back and check what I thought about it at the time. My memory of it was, it's weird, so I guess I like it, because I think by this point, or certainly I'd covered a fair few Edinburgh International Film Festivals at the time, and a lot of the films you get at film festivals turn out to be incredibly dull. Oh, yeah, and this is certainly not dull.
Yes, well, Scott, we'd both done a number of EIFFs together by that point. Mm-hmm. I'll just mention that on that very episode in which we discussed this, we also discussed Our Day Will Come, about, the coming uprising of the gingers, yeah. Yes. And Postmortem, the world's proudest, most barricadey building film.
Yes. Film festivals are weird. Particularly if you get to watch almost every film that comes out in them. It's a weird selection box that you get, and almost every of them are turds rather than chocolate. But anyway, The Last Circus, I was pleased to come back to this and find that I feel more or less the same way as at least remember thinking of this, because this is really weird. Like I said, I'm not sure I really like it, but it is so strange that you kind of have to watch it. It demands your attention all the way throughout it, and it's completely unhinged. I'm not going to attempt to map any sort of meaning into this at all, but I can't take my eyes off it. It's a hell of a thing to watch. I think ultimately I don't have an awful lot more to say than you have already, Drew. But there's an awful lot going on here. I don't think more than half of it actually lands, but still that somehow is enough to certainly keep you engaged going through this, wondering what on earth's going to happen next. It is unlike anything I've seen, even from the director himself, just excluding his kind of work. It's quite outre for him. I can't think of anything else that's particularly like it. It's really strange. It's really interesting. I don't think it's actually good, but it's such an anomaly that, again, if you've any interest in films at all, you really need to see this because it's so strange. And I don't know if that's necessarily a complete recommendation, but I suppose it kind of is. It's a unique little curate's egg of a film. I could pick more individual faults with it as if I went into any real detail, but I don't think that's particularly useful in this case because the kind of totality of it is so strange and weird and violent and occasionally touching and often just weird. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting filmmaking, and that's what I would like to encourage people to watch, if nothing else. Whether you think it's good or bad, I think if you find it interesting, that's surely enough, and this is certainly that. I don't know if I liked it more or less on a second viewing. I think I just found it weird on both occasions, and that's good enough for me.
I'll let you know that you do in fact like it considerably more on a second viewing.
Fair enough.
Because, as I said, we didn't discuss it for long, but and I was more negative on it than you were. But you'd found, I think you said basically the first third, maybe the first hour, really interesting. Then it just kind of went off the rails, and you're just like, "What the hell is this now?"
Yeah.
Whereas my interest wandered a bit earlier than that. I really do think it is about something, actually, and I'm pretty confident I could defend that point or those points pretty well. I mean, I'm sure it's because the fact it's about the Spanish Civil War and the Franco's regime and things, that there's so much of that in there, and clearly the wounds that a civil war leaves.
Yeah.
And the fact that the director's Basque.
Yes.
And so there's the El Luta thing going on in the background. He was finally pardoned after Franco died. And he'd always maintained his innocence, but that was going on in the background. So there's that kind of symbol of, he was seen as a folk hero, basically, a symbol of opposition against Franco. And with the director being Basque, that massive ETA car bomb, it's how El Lobo ended, if you remember, Scott. It was about the guy who infiltrated ETA. Whose name I forget, Mikhail something. Michael. So it's got that in the Admiral
Carrero Blanco.
Yes, Carrero Blanco. I looked up earlier and it's gone right in my head, but yes, that massive car bomb that's in it kind of coincides with Javier's story. That's not unintentional. That was a massive thing. Left a crater in the road, and something massive in terms of the actual thing and the impact as well. So I'm sure there's a lot of kind of the tensions of being in a country after a civil war. There's the whole Franco thing. There's potentially the Basque separatist movements with the director being Basque. And it's because there's references to ETA in there. There's parental stuff, maybe dead parents. There's so much in there, and I really do think I could. It's about a lot of things, and I could defend a point on that. The problem is, it's about a lot of things.
Yes.
Sometimes it feels like it's about all of the things. And then there's I don't know if there are direct references to anything. But there's so much there that does call back, make you think of Frankenstein is the big one. Monsters not knowing how to love, and then but twisted on the outside but good inside, but then Javier ends up being a monster anyway.
Yeah.
And then it's women's, she sort of falls in love with both of them, but neither of them are good for her, and it doesn't work out for her anyway. So by that point, my head was just too full of much, and I was just enjoying Carolina Bang's legs instead, which I know is really shallow, but it was such incredible visual overload, and I'm like, no, I'll look at those instead. And I'm like, oh, how did I not remember that? Legs being my thing, but no, it's so much interesting going on. I just think the director ought to have shown a little restraint and not had everything interesting going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've not seen anything like it. It's pretty damn unique.
Yes.
But for me personally, it may be too much with the clowns.